Tony versus Charles Oliveira. So surprisingly, this fight was announced last week. The fight that was supposed to be happening was Tony versus Michael Chandler. I think because of the timing issue, especially with Chandler cutting weight so recently, he's probably a little bit older. He doesn't want to have like multiple weight cuts back to back. Unlike some people like Tony, he doesn't care. That man just cuts weight whenever he wants. But Tony's it's a very strange thing. So he talks about like, okay, whatever, he cut all that weight and he didn't make a big issue out of it. But then he comes on and he says other things like, oh, I'm a really big guy. I should actually fight at 170. And if you look at him, he's pretty tall too, right? He's a big guy. Yeah. Like his frame is big. Like you could see potentially he would be like one of those bigger guys. Like maybe if there was like a 175, if he was like a natural weight, he'll probably be around that 175, 180, around that range. Maybe actually higher if I think about it. Maybe we're like closer to like 190, 200 range. But anyway, so the fight that he's been scheduled for is on December 12th against Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is a guy that's been in the game for so long. Like if you want to go through the list of fighters that he's fought basically everybody, except for like except for the ones that are on top recently, like Khabib and Conor, most notably. But if you go through the list, this guy's faced Anthony Pettis, Paul Felder, Max Holloway, Jeremy Stevens, Frankie Edgar, but he's gone through ups and downs. So he's been in the UFC for a while. Right now, he's been on this resurgence where he's won, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights in a row. And every single one of them was a finish. Submission, TKO, KO, submission. The most recent was Kevin Lee, where Kevin Lee went for a takedown. And as he's going in, he kind of got caught, similar to what like Kane got caught by Verdum, if you remember that, where he got caught in a guillotine. But Charles Oliveira is on a hot streak. It kind of feels like Charles is now in his prime. He's used all that fight experience to actually, and he's taken that fight experience, implemented it in his game, and is very much a veteran in the octagon.
Well, honestly, I haven't watched too much of Oliveira, but from what I've watched though, I've heard that his cardio is really good, right?
Yeah, so he's a world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. Mm-hmm. So if you think about him, he's been compared to Tony Ferguson. He's basically a light version of Tony Ferguson. Not necessarily that he's inferior to Tony Ferguson. They basically have the same kind of styles. They kind of strike differently, but they both are really good on the ground, have world-class jiu-jitsu, ridiculous cardio, never give up, veterans, go on these long win streaks, know how to win MMA fights. So it's kind of the old guard in terms of Tony versus the kind of old but not really old guard in Charles Oliveira. I think prediction wise, I think Tony has a lot to prove. He's coming off that big loss against Justin Gaethje. He knows that he had some downfalls in his training in his preparation, because he was, prior to Justin Gaethje, he was supposed to face Khabib. Khabib and Justin Gaethje are completely different fighters. So I give some slack to Tony on that end. Plus, Tony came off a weight cut.
He might for not no reason. For reason. I remember seeing it on his Instagram. He's a samurai. He's like, I'm gonna cut weight just for the mental edge, and then he drops it, and then he gains it back, and then he drops it again for the actual fight. It's a bit unprofessional, you know. But that's Tony. So
some would say it was more professional than not cutting weight. Yeah. It might have been a scenario where maybe the UFC was involved and they wouldn't pay him fully unless they did that. But that stuff usually comes out, so probably not. I think I lean more towards Tony being more of a fundamentalist, right? Where he's like all about like the honor and prestige of like fighting and saying, you know what, I committed to cutting weight. I'm going to cut weight because this guy failed to come and show up for the fight. I'm going to do it even though he couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So I think I give a lot of slack to Tony on that end. I don't think these two guys will submit each other or even entertain trying to go on the ground and trying to tap each other out, just because both of them are just ridiculous on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's going to end up being a striking match. I always favor Tony whenever he faces somebody that is not one of those elite guys.
Well, he's arguably probably top 3 best striker in the lightweight division, right? So you can't.
Yeah, he's not necessarily the most technical. He's not necessarily the most. Volume. He's volume, and it's very diverse, mm-hmm. right? Charles Oliveira is very similar to that, but it's not as grand, as big as Tony's. Now, Charles Oliveira can shock us all, or just go out there and beat Tony at his own game. But I picked Tony. Tony's getting up in age, but I feel like he still has that edge. We saw in the Justin fight, he still showed glimpses of being Tony. So I don't think the amount of time that he's been off would make him any worse since that fight. Who do you think wins?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to have to go Tony Ferguson as well. I mean, you can't bet against Tony Ferguson.
You're not going to agree with me?
No, because you said Tony Ferguson, right?
Tony Ferguson's going to win.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because you, honestly...
You say you're not going to agree with me, headass.
No, I said I'm going to agree with you. That's what I said.
Okay.
Honestly, you can't bet against Tony Ferguson, okay? I'll tell you that. Yeah. Like, yes, like he might have lost to Gaethje, but that's, it was a weird circumstance, and, the fight shouldn't have happened to begin with, but it did happen. But Tony Ferguson, too much of volume, too much of unpredictability, you can't go against Tony Ferguson, so I'm going to go Tony Ferguson.
Yeah. So I would be really surprised that it goes on the ground, just because both of them know that they will have a hard time on the ground in terms of getting any sort of advantage. And when you go into the ground with Tony, you know that he's super active. So you're going to be eating elbows regardless if you're landing shots from the top. You're still going to eat a lot. So your best bet is stand up and beat him like the same way that Justin beat him. So that might be Charles Oliveira's game plan, is to do what Justin did. But I don't know. I don't think Tony would take a step back. I don't think Tony would, after the Justin fight, come into this fight and not make any changes or implement any game plan that would help him not get beat on the feet like that again. Conor McGregor versus Dustin 2, scheduled for January what?
23rd, 2021.
23rd. Finally, everything's been signed. It was released by Conor's camp that he actually signed the papers and the bout is finalized.
There might be some fans in attendance too.
So I think Dana White is leaning towards having the fight at Fight Island. So attendance-wise, and he's a stickler. Every time there's a press conference or anything like that, the UFC reporters will ask him, hey, will you have any attendance and anything like that? And Dana's response every single time is, I don't want anything less than full capacity. But beyond that, they don't really ask him what his actual motive is, right? The reasoning behind it. Is it because, is it a principle thing? Like, hey, I don't want to have half the arena empty. Is it a financial thing? Is it a PR thing where he doesn't want people to think like, oh, he's not doing it full capacity, or he's doing it, but he's doing it half capacity, which also gets criticism because people say, oh, why even have that many people, right? If you have half a capacity of a 50,000 person stadium, that's 25,000 people that potentially could get sick, right? Mm-hmm. So is he also doing it for that reason? So I wonder what his actual reasoning is. I haven't seen anything where the reporter will go in depth and ask him beyond.
Well, there's only like a select few countries right now, right, where you can even be in a stadium. I think Australia is one of them. New Zealand, I think. But
in the states, United States, there's states where they
wants to have
allow.
It in the States, though. But
no, but that's what I'm saying. Is what's the reason why he doesn't want a portion of the capacity to be there? Because even a portion of the capacity does generate revenue, and I'm sure the people that do come there will pay an extra premium to compensate for whatever potential losses.
I'm just not sure how it would come across on live TV though. With like, let's say maybe if it's 50,000 people capacity, you have like 5,000 people there. I don't think it would sound as well. There'd be like dull echoes, you know. I'm not sure. I mean, there's probably ways to fix that, but even then, I'm not sure how they would.
I'm curious to know more details. It could just simply be like, hey, I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather just go to Abu Dhabi, which it probably is the location for Conor versus Dustin too. A lot of the odds makers and a lot of the public are talking about this fight, and they are essentially writing off Dustin. They are already crowning Conor as a champion, or sorry, the winner of this fight, and saying that good on Conor. He's about to go on and potentially fight for a title fight. Maybe talking about Khabib coming back, kind of ignoring and looking past Dustin, right? Which is a very, very dangerous thing because
he's fought some tough competition in the past few years where Conor has been inactive, right? So you can't really.
Yeah. Conor has been out for a very long time, and Dustin has been fighting top level
Max Holloway,
fighters,
Khabib,
and getting better. Yeah. Justin, Max Holloway, Eddie Alvarez, Khabib, the list goes on.
Yeah.
So I don't blame some people, because if you look at it on paper, Conor beat Dustin in the first fight, which was at featherweight, fairly quickly. He got in his head. He really played a mental game. That is, Conor played a mental game against Dustin. Got Dustin really aggravated, made him make mistakes, and eventually got knocked out by Conor. So I see how people could say, okay, it's just going to be the same situation. Conor's going to come up, wait for his shot, counter, and knock him out again, which potentially could happen, right? Because even though Dustin has evolved and gotten better and has all this new IQ that he's obtained from all these fights and new training, and he's much bigger now, he's at 155, he does have a similar style than he used to have. It's a much more refined and a more precise skill, but it's basically the same skill set. I could see Conor going in there and doing something similar to the first fight, but more realistically, the way I see this fight is Dustin comes in, picks his shots, tries not to get countered, maybe goes for the takedown. I could see him go for the takedown. Or at least at the least he will fake takedowns just to get Conor on his feet. Conor hasn't had a takedown attempted on him since Cowboy's fight, and that was like a half-ass takedown attempt anyways, because he was all Cowboy was all rocked.
Yeah.
But I can see Dustin come in there, pick his shots, hit him with some power, fatigue Conor, take him into the 4th, 5th round, and win by decision.
Well, with Dustin Poirier, I think for sure one thing you have to take into account is that he has like a very strong chin, right? So personally, I see the fight going all the way. I don't see like a knockout happening, but if it does go to the scorecard,
but you're forgetting who's punching, right?
Who Conor is, yeah, of course.
Who's punching? He's already knocked him out with the same power. It's the same left hand, and it wasn't necessarily his chin that he hit. He hit him in the back of the ear, which is regardless of how great your chin is, that's not your chin. That's the back of your head, right, or the side of your head. So let's not forget, Conor has power, and against Justin Gaethje, he did take a lot of shots, right? Which goes to your point, but you never know. High kicks as well. Dustin, who has Dustin faced that kicks like Conor in recent memory.
No,
Khabib
really.
doesn't kick like Conor. Max. That was Max. Max kicks, but not that much.
Max is a boxer. That's what Max is. He's not really.
So Justin doesn't kick at all. Eddie Alvarez not
Gaethje?
so much. Justin Gaethje doesn't kick.
No,
he
does
low kicks. Sorry,
low kicks.
He does low kicks.
Low kicks. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like head kicks and body kicks.
Yeah.
I'm talking anything below above the waist.
Yeah, that's not really Justin Gaethje.
So I still take Conor in the rematch just because I prefer I like to choose a guy that counters all the time. I do take into account the ring rust and the having momentum and being in fights more often does help you. But the thing is that Conor came in against Cowboy and looked like he had no rest at all. He came in guns blazing, and he has no problem starting fast. There's some fighters like Cowboy who don't know how to start fast, who progressively
who are slow starters.
Get better as the fight goes on. Conor is the inverse, so he's better in the beginning and then he declines.
Yeah.
So
in the first 2 rounds, if you get by that Conor, then you have a much higher chance. But you're right. In the first 2 rounds, it's playing with fire, you know. So
yeah, exactly. So I could see Conor coming out right away, imposing his counter striking, throwing high kicks, right, just overwhelming Dustin, and finishing him. But there could also be Conor doing that. Dustin learned from his previous fights, moves out of the way, and outlasts Conor until like the 4th, 5th round, and maybe finishes him or gets a decision. But I lean towards more Conor finishing him.
It's basically don't fight in the middle of the ring, you know. Just don't be in the middle of the ring with Conor. That's it. If you can push me against a cage, then your chances go up like exponentially, right? So
yeah, exactly. Okay. Jorge versus Colby. So this is not a confirmed fight at all. Both these guys have been off the radar. I have no idea what happened. Trump is most likely going to lose. It's almost official. And Colby himself has fallen off the MMA map. In terms of, I don't follow Colby. I don't know if you do, but I haven't heard a word from him in terms of MMA. Well, it's weird
though because him and Jorge are pretty big Trump supporters, right? So
I don't know if Jorge is.
Jorge is a big Trump supporter. Humongous.
Yeah. Anyways, let's not get into politics, but both these guys have been off the map. I haven't seen or heard much of them in the MMA world. They've been brought up in press conferences to Dana, questions about, what do you think Jorge and Colby should be fighting and whatnot. Dana hasn't shown interest in that fight in terms of saying like, oh yeah, that's a good fight. Oh, we're looking into that, blah 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 blah. So that fight is not on the map. I wanted more to see I wanted to see more into your insight. What do you think Jorge does from here next, and what does Colby do here from next?
Well, Colby just came off the fight with Woodley, right, where he absolutely
destroyed him,
Woodley, right, with that. With the rib pop in the end, almost, right? It was pure disruption. But I think with Colby, I think he wants to fight against a Kamaru again, right? So he wants that first. Jorge, I think Jorge and Diaz will probably cross paths again. I think we'll see that one more time before.
So
Jorge.
that fight was rumored to be actually confirmed. The Nate versus Jorge rematch.
Yeah.
But then another fight came into the mix where it was maybe Colby and Jorge, but neither one of them have been finalized. I have no idea what's going on. Jorge went and made his big dollars from the Kamaru Usman Fight Island short notice fight. And completely disappeared from the map.
But you see, currently. With Jorge, I think he's the kind of guy where he wants to fight whoever has the most hype at the moment, right? We saw it with Ben Askren. I think potentially, the big potentially, we could see him versus Khamzat. I would love to see that, Jorge versus Khamzat. If Khamzat wins a few more fights, and if Jorge is if he's inactive for a little bit longer, it would be a cool fight to see.
I think those two guys are going to be kept separate. I don't think they'll cross paths.
You don't think so?
I think Chimaev is going to be more on the route of going for the title, and Jorge is going to go more on the route of big money fights and hype fights, like you said.
Yeah.
So Jorge will be targeted again more around the Nate fight against Colby.
See Conor fight
maybe Conor. Yeah, Conor if Conor loses. Those kind of fights, or maybe a rematch with Kamaru after one of those fights goes through and he wins. I don't think Chimaev will be in that type of conversation, because he's kind of he lives in his own kind of bubble, right?
Yeah.
Where he's like this guy that is this new hype. There's so much hype behind him, so much support. There's so much support behind him as well. So he's more of like, let's get this guy to the top and to the championship, than rather than Jorge, which he's more of the like, oh, I'm a badass and
he's a cash cow
of the
UFC right now.
Yeah. So he's more of that alley and that aisle and whatever you want to say, and Chimaev's on the other end. Potentially they could fight, but I don't really see that connection. For me, I think Jorge, the fight that the next fight that makes sense is Nate. But the problem with the Nate fight is these Diaz brothers. They come on and then they come on the map and then they leave the map. That's the story of the word of the story.
They might be. What? Honestly, yeah, but the issue with that fight is that like they're trying to push that fight again, but even after the first fight, man, it was pure destruction in the rounds that actually took place before the stoppage. It was all Jorge on the ground, on the feet, everything, right? So like, do you really want to see that again? I'm not sure. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to see it again. But
I don't necessarily have that much hype towards it. It is an interesting fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it again. But in terms of like getting excited, not necessarily.
I say we push Nate away. We bring back Nick Diaz.
Nick Diaz. See, the problem is that these Diaz brothers do what they please. So they don't buy to any time schedule or anything like that. There was reports of Nick Diaz getting into shape and that he was confirmed going to fight either the end of this year or the beginning of next year. I forget what it was.
It was end of this year against Jorge. It was supposed to be happening, but
I don't know if it was against Jorge. I think it was maybe somebody else. But he gets in the news and then he disappears. He gets in the news and he disappears. So I try not to put too much weight on these news, because these guys a lot of times it's either miscommunication, made up reports, or just them like saying it and then changing their mind. Their camp says it and then they change their mind. So I don't think just to go back to Jorge and the Nate Diaz fight, I don't think it does as big of numbers. But if you go back to the fight, you can hear Nate talk about it in terms of what actually happened. What his reasoning was that he just trained differently for this fight. His game plan just didn't work. He wanted to take the beginning slow. No, sorry. He wanted to go all out in the beginning and then outlast Jorge. It was something strange. I forget what it was. So, but essentially what he was saying was that his game plan just didn't work. And then you saw what happened. So Jorge went and just ran through him and beat him without stoppage.
Especially on the ground as well, you know. That was an impressive performance by Jorge.
Yeah. It wasn't really a grappling ground fight. It was just a ground and pound, just Jorge imposing as well. I wouldn't mind seeing that. And the second fight is Colby, but the problem with the Colby fight is I think Colby would just take him down. If you look at videos of, so Colby and Jorge used to be best friends or like training partners. Colby used to sleep on his couch for a very long time, and he would help him out. Jorge would help Colby out as his journey progressed in the MMA world. If you look at all these videos, Colby is taking down Jorge at will. Like, Jorge cannot like compare his grappling to Colby's grappling. So what makes me fearful is what Colby does is that he's standing on the feet. He realizes that he can't really eat all these shots, because the last time he did that, it was against Usman, and Usman broke his jaw. Right after a certain amount of time, your body breaks down. So what he'll do is that he'll feel his power and decide to take him down because he knows that he can take him down. From there, he just beats him up, wears him down, and then rinse and repeats for the rest of the fight. A decision win by Colby. Next fight, Stipe versus Francis 2. So I don't think there's actually a confirmed date for this, but this is the next fight confirmed from the UFC, from Dana White, from the horse's mouth. I don't think there's going to be any chance that Jones gets put into this fight as a title contender at heavyweight yet. The only way that I could see that John Jones gets put into that fight is if either one of these guys get hurt. If Stipe gets hurt, then Francis versus him, interim belt. Or if Francis gets hurt, then Stipe versus John Jones for the belt. But regardless, Stipe versus Francis. Francis has been on a tear. He's just been knocking out every single person he's been fighting since he's lost to Stipe in that first fight. He's beat everybody by knockout, including Kane. He's beat Rosenstrike. The list goes on. JDS, I think, was in that list as well. Stipe, on the other hand, has fought DC, and he has fought DC since that fight. I think there was actually somebody else that he fought in between there, but if I'm wrong, the point is that Stipe hasn't been fighting that many people. Stipe is arguably, statistically and like record-wise, the GOAT of UFC's heavyweight division. He's defended it the most time. He's had it and beat pound for pound the best heavyweights ever. He's beat the likes of DC twice. He also beat. Give me some people that he beat.
Who?
Stipe. Verdum. He's beat Verdum. He's beat Alistair Overeem.
Beat DC twice. You know.
Yeah, he beat two times. Twice. Yeah. Don't rub it in. Yeah.
I'm not rubbing it in.
Yeah. So he's beat a lot of people.
The truth is he's a bad man. Okay, that's what it is.
Yes. Stipe deserves the respect. In the community, he doesn't really. Sometimes he doesn't get the respect that he deserves because. He's not necessarily the most exciting fighter. He doesn't give you those highlight finishes that Francis will give you. He doesn't give you necessarily the most spectacular submissions, but he does get the job done. He's gone in there and time after time and won fights using his skills and abilities. So his chin is fantastic. He's able to eat shots from monsters, even though he's not the biggest heavyweight. As well, his boxing is very, very elite. He's able to bob and weave and implement his striking on likes of Overeem, right? Who's a K1 champion, is a kickboxer of so many years, and he's still able to impose his will on Overeem. That being said, there's a big question mark on what Francis brings to the table, and that includes power, and that includes wildness, to the point where you can't really predict what's going to happen. My head says Stipe wins, just because on paper Stipe does everything better than what does better on paper than what Francis does on paper, except for power. Everything else Stipe does better. Wrestling defense, grappling, striking precision, body shots, just variation of strikes, everything Stipe does better. The one thing that he doesn't do better at is having Super Saiyan powers. That's essentially the only thing that he doesn't do better at.
What I think is that Stipe Miocic, you can never bet against him, you know? I remember one video I talked bad about him, and then I was called a casual. So what I'm going to say is that Stipe Miocic, he's always going to be the favorite in the heavyweight division. I'm not going to bet against him. And so, therefore, I think that Stipe Miocic is going to win It's gonna be early round knockout, and that's that. Because I don't want because I don't want to be called a casual.
How you gonna switch all the way 180 like that?
Because I don't want to be called a casual by Mr.
No.
Saeed Khan.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
I don't want to be called a casual.
What do you think?
I don't want to be called a casual. Honestly, say what you, that's what I think. That's what I think. That's what I think.
Okay. That's what I think. Okay. You heard it here first. All you have to do is call him a casual, and he'll change his opinion on anything.